Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Planning Applications Committee meeting of Tuesday 19th of April. Those who came with Sederunt and apologies, please.
Good morning. We have 17 members present, and I have apologies from Councillor Martin and Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Dick, Councillor McGregor are not present but may be along later in the meeting.
Thanks, Lucius. Declarations of interest, members? Any declarations of interest? None? Okay. Minute of the meeting of 22nd of March 2016 for approval. Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. Just the only real opportunity to pick up on this, just regards to the decision we made, it was at item 5, and the land, page 3, I think, Chairman, land to northwest of Black Creek Farm, what may have been plan application, erection, agricultural storage building, biomass boiler, blah, blah, blah. It goes on to the decision, and it's the contents within the actual decision. I don't think it reflects fully what was being the aspirations of the committee at the time. Don't know how we stand in that. What our status is in regards to that. I take it the decision notice has been sent out, but certainly I know from my own self, part of my statement was that I would like the bund was to be raised. I think if members remember, by a meeting and planting on top of that to try and add some extra screening. And I said I'd like to see the north, south, and west, in particular the west and the south, I think was an emphasis, which was the top to be raised, and that wasn't reflected. It was only the west was mentioned. I just wonder what would the outcome be with that? Will it be specifically tied down as tight as that, or will there be an option to better reflect the decision that was made within the actual decision notice? And the reason I'm saying that, Chairman, because normally I would come in and say, listen, I would change the minute, because I don't think the minute does. I would put forward a motion to change the minute so it better reflected what we actually said. Listen back to the recording, and it was actually said north, south, and west in regards to that. So, of course, we're in a regulatory meeting, so I just don't know how. I'd like to better understand how that's reflected within the decision notice, how we take that forward. I don't think the aspirations of the meeting were met.
Well, it's supposed to reflect a true record of the decisions made, no so much the detail of discussion and sentiment contained within that. But I'll actually recommend I'll ask David to deal with it.
Chair, if I remember correctly, there was the planning application site, and then there was a blue boundary around about the planning application site. The blue boundary around the planning application site did not take the north and west or south and west areas into consideration, but because the blue line round about had the area where we wanted the bund and raised by a metre, that was agreed by the committee.
For Councillor Carruthers' sake, David, can you just confirm the situation, please, because it is intended to be a true record of the decision members made this minute.
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm that the decision notice was issued 2 days after the meeting last time round. I'm also aware that there have been discussions with Councillor Carruthers' group on this matter. Basically, in short, that was the understanding of what the officers felt was being discussed. It was the bund, if you actually look at the approved landscaping scheme, runs along the western boundary. There is really no significant bunding to the north or indeed the south where the levels change. But you will note it's a suspensive condition that requires a scheme, an amended landscaping scheme, to be submitted and approved. And that allows the officer to actually take on board the views of the members and ensure that, as far as possible, that bund can be extended around the new building to capture that as well. And that's certainly what will be done.
Satisfied with that, Ian?
Satisfied the fact I get the reassurance that'll be done. So as long as the actual actions provided the minute isn't wholly accurate. We've seen that before in the past, but so satisfied as far as the actions behind that will actually reflect the decision that was made within and the aspirations of the committee at the time.
Thank you. Any other points on the minute? In that case, if members are satisfied, we'll deem that a true record of the minute, 22nd of March. Come to item 4, a continued application. Land approximately 350 metres southeast from the road, junction C227 and the C26 flow of Elrig, Port William, planning application, information review access, and David Sutty is about to give members an update on the position in respect of that. Apparently I've forgotten the procedural process that Lucy will explain to members and members of the public and in the public gallery. If Lucy can just explain the process that will be adopted through the proceedings today, please.
The Planning Applications Committee will consider each application in turn as detailed on the agenda. The case officer or other appointed officer will make a short presentation addressing the determining issues accompanied by digital images. Any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported at this time. Members may ask questions of officers following the presentation on points of clarification. The chairman has been provided with a list of eligible representatives who have registered to speak at this meeting within the specified council policy. No other persons will be allowed to speak. The chairman will individually invite those who have registered in advance to speak to make their presentation, after which they may be questioned by committee members. No questions may be asked of members. The order of eligible parties being heard will be as follows: third parties objecting to an application, third parties supporting an application, statutory consultees objecting to an application, elected members of Dumfries and Galloway Council who are not members of the Planning Application Committee. Such members should withdraw from the committee chamber after making their presentation. Applicants or their agents. Representatives have been placed in alphabetical order, and a copy of the public speaking list is available from the committee officer taking notes of our proceedings. Presentations will be strictly limited to 3 minutes per person, excepting for national and major developments, which by their very nature are more complex, where the time limit will be 5 minutes. In this meeting, 3 minutes has been allocated to each item. The chairman of the committee will ask you to come to a conclusion if you take too long. Representatives are encouraged to use the time allotted to clarify any points they consider material and address the determining issues. Certain matters are not normally material planning considerations and will not be taken into account by the council when deciding on a planning application. Representatives should not raise any new matters without explaining why they were not raised earlier with the case officer. Please do not repeat what is in the report, as members will have already read the report. After all the representations have been heard, the meeting is then in formal session and no members of the public may address the committee from the public gallery. The Planning Application Committee will then proceed to determine the application or, where appropriate, agree a recommendation to be made to full council, who will determine the application.
Thanks again, Lucy. Thank you very much. Okay, members, I've now outlined application number 4, and David will give us an update on the status of application number 4.
Thank you, Chair. Members may recall this was considered at a previous meeting, and a visit was arranged for the 7th of April, which took place. Obviously, from a planning perspective, the only thing we can actually look at is the access, the geometry, and if it's safe, that is basically acceptable in planning terms. But we were well aware, certainly through Councillor McClung, who came along and spoke about concerns about the effect on the road network by carrying out forestry activities. Now, as a result of that, in the background, there's been a lot of discussions going on between roads officers and the applicant. And I got an email yesterday from the Graham Allison, the road network manager, who's confirmed that the applicant is going to be withdrawing this application and submitting a new application, which will come out onto the C26, which will prevent the need for the convoluted route that was of concern, certainly to Councillor McClung. And he's verbally agreed on a traffic management plan for the use of the C26 and the B7005, so, and adding a number of extra passing places. So all in all, that, although it's not technically a planning matter, it means this application, which is before you, is going to be withdrawn, and a further application will come in, which will hopefully address concerns which were expressed.
It would appear common sense prevailed. Everybody content that this matter has been withdrawn. Go to item 5. Okay, thanks, members. Ivor?
Has the applicant asked the planners to withdraw it, or has it Mr. Allison, who has said that the applicant's going to withdraw it, just for governance issues, as in, because we had one licensing board where someone said they were representing somebody and the actual applicant turned around and said, no, they weren't speaking on their behalf.
David?
That's correct. I would like to have actually seen a formal confirmation that the application had been withdrawn. The only party that has the power to withdraw an application is the applicant. So I am taking this on hearsay, but given Graham has put this in black and white to me that the application is to be withdrawn, I'd ask that members, basically, probably the best way of doing this is to defer this to a future meeting if it isn't withdrawn. So in the event that the application isn't actually withdrawn, then it can come back and you can consider it. But the information I have at the moment is that the withdrawal is impending and will come forward very shortly in writing.
So you're now suggesting, David, we defer the matter rather than withdraw it?
It's not in my power to withdraw the application. We have an intimation it is going to be withdrawn, but no more than that. So the best thing to do, I would suggest, is actually just defer this. In the event the application is withdrawn, then it won't be coming back to a future meeting.
Thanks for that, David. Alistair?
Just to say, Chair, as far as I'm concerned, it would appear that common sense is in the process of breaking out, and I would commend Mr. Sutty and his staff unreservedly for their role in that. I'll leave it at that, sir.
Okay, there's now a change in the decision members are about to make. We are now agreed, I presume unanimously, to defer this matter to a further meeting. Is that the case? Can you duly record that, please, Lucy? Okay, members, we come to agenda item 5. Erection of agricultural building at 2 Kilfillan Holdings, Glenluce, Newton Stewart. Reference number 16/P/1/003. Application type is full planning permission. The recommendation is to refuse the application, and the case officer is Iona Brooke. Iona, when you're ready, just take us through your presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. The site is due south of the village of Glenluce. It's in a remote and rural location, quite an elevated location. It is one of 3 agricultural units within very close proximity of each other. Outlined in blue is land under the ownership of the applicant. There is a separate, just to the north of, between the 2 blue areas, there is a separate agricultural unit and a third agricultural unit just to the right. The building that is proposed is considered typical for an agricultural building of this modern age, and is composed of concrete walls, green box pile sheeting, and natural grey fibre cement roof. The agricultural building is proposed just to the left of where the trees are in this image. This site is taken from the applicant's farmstead. Beyond the tractor is a slurry lagoon with a silage pit, again just further to the north of that, and it's proposed to put the agricultural shed just to the rear of the silage pit. This is the site here, and you can see to the left just the bund that relates to the silage pit. And this is looking south towards the site with the silage pit to the rear and the applicant's current farmstead just to the north. Looking east towards number 1 Kilfillan, now this house relates to a separate agricultural unit. And this just shows the proximity of the shed. The shed would be just adjacent to the boundary of the wall on the right-hand side. Then you have the house, and then you have the trees and the garden curtilage of this separate agricultural unit. These photographs may look familiar, as the previous application was submitted in 2013 and brought before yourselves, and the elected members chose to take a site visit before that previous application was refused. You can appreciate that there's quite an open aspect to the west and to the north as it stands at this moment. It is recommended that this application is refused because the proposal would have a detrimental effect on the amenity of the occupants of the house by a loss of aspect that is currently enjoyed. Thank you.
Thanks, Iona. Does any member have questions for the case officer? Ian?
Thanks, Chair, and apologies for late arrival. Could you just expand on the expression loss of aspect?
Iona? David's got to deal with it.
This was an aspect, excuse the pun, that was looked into very much at the time of the previous application. There clearly isn't a right to a view across a third party's land. So, for example, in that scene there, if a building was to be erected in the middle distance and that was spoiling the view across Luce Bay of the applicant, that wouldn't be a material planning consideration. But aspect is a different matter. It's I think as Iona really showed on that slide there, it's to do with the proximity of that building to the house, which is in different ownership. And you've got the principal elevation of that house there, which is going to be staring straight into that building. Now that's a bit disparate, a bit different to loss of view across a third party's land. It's the effect on the amenity of that property that's really being looked at here, rather than just they happen to have a nice view.
Thanks, David. Any other member? Councillor Diggle?
Thank you. How does this application differ to the one that we refused back in November 2014?
Iona?
The application in 2014 was refused by lots of aspects. The applicant has sought to remedy many of the issues in the previous proposals in regards to, just bear with me.
Chair, one of the key things was one of the elevations was actually open towards one Kilfillan, so that has now been closed off, so you weren't going to get the odour and the nuisance. So that has been addressed.
So there is a difference, Peter. Do you want to come back? Fine with that, okay. Any other member? Okay, then if members are satisfied with that, we have one objector and an agent. So can we have Hayley Copeland, please, an objector, and you will have 3 minutes, Hayley. I will remind you with 30 seconds to go to draw your presentation to a conclusion.
Thanks.
Whenever you're ready here.
Hi. I spoke at the last planning meeting in October 2014 when the first application was put forward. Once again, we've stated in our letter that we've never had an objection to a shed being built at the property. It's just purely to object against the site that it's being built on. All the reasons regarding the impact on our home, the loss of privacy, the noise, the lighting issues all remain the same as when I spoke before, and I'll not go over these again unless there's anything specific you'd like to know. After the first meeting in August, many of you also visited the site, and it was after a site visit was agreed and the site remains the same. There are some new issues I'd like to raise though. The first one that was refused in November 14 was 705 square metres, and then in March 2015 a DPA was also applied for, which was 457 square metres. This shed which is being discussed today is 925 square metres. These are all very different sizes of sheds which were all to serve the same purpose, and to us it just feels as if the applicant wants to put a shed on this site no matter what size it is. Animal welfare issues were also raised in the supporting letters as to why a new shed is required at number 2 Kilfillan. However, it's been nearly 3 years since the first application was put forward, and there has never been any scope to try and change things in order to get a shed put up that they state would improve the animal welfare and efficiency of their business. Despite claims that the shed has been changed to address previous concerns, being livestock farmers and looking at the new design, we have concerns regarding the ventilation for the amount of cattle that are to be housed in the shed. After talking to Stephen, one of the partners at the Academy Vets, he said and looked at the plans and believes that the lack of ventilation would also create welfare problems, and we feel that this would create further issues, whereas redesign of the shed would be required to put in more ventilation or fans to force ventilation, which would create more noise. In the letters of support for the applicant, along with Mr. Fallis, it stated that since the refusal of the first application that we've built further sheds on our own property. We've not built any sheds since the first planning application was refused. There is planning permission for us to build one other shed, but nothing has been started yet. The shed that has been built and the one that's been applied for, as well as any other sheds that have been on the neighbouring holding at number 3 Kilfillan, have always been built on where old buildings have been taken down, not new greenfield sites as the site proposed for this application.
30 seconds to go, Hayley.
Okay. Mr. Fallis also wrote in his letter that the use of existing buyers did not offer the amount of space required, although earlier in the same letter he said that the shed is to house an existing herd. So if there's not enough space in the existing buyers for the herd he has, surely this means that the size of his herd is going to be bigger, which means more cattle will be housed opposite a house than has previously been housed in his own steading. This is the third time,
including conclusion now, Haley.
Okay. This is the third time, including the DPA, that we've had to go through this, and each time it affects us emotionally as a family. I've been told the house has been there for 150 years, and the setting's been enjoyed by everyone who's lived and visited it, and it would be nice to see it left there for the future as well.
Thanks, Haley. Can you just remain a minute in case some members want to ask you any
Okay.
questions? Have you any questions for the objector member? In that case, Haley, will you take your seat again, please? Thank you. Okay, we now have David Fallis, the agent. David, you will have the same 3 minutes, and I'll remind you with 30 seconds to go to draw your presentation to a conclusion. And again, whenever you're ready, David.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak, Chair. Since the refusal of the last application, we took on board the comments that were within the reason for refusal and went back and looked at the whole thing once again, took on the idea about can the thing fit on the buyers that were to be removed, and to put the shed on that we needed size-wise. We then made it the whole of the farmsteading itself, the whole of the yard would have needed to be done because it blocked off all manner of circulation routes where the animals are. We looked at sites out with the confines of the existing steading to the south and round to the west, but because of ground conditions, landform, etc., it was going to entail a significant amount of underbuilding, setting out of platforms, etc., which, when you look at the design guidance that's now in place, is to be avoided at all costs. So we're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place and having to keep coming back to this same particular spot. We've revised the design of it to overcome the stated reasons for the refusal the last time, which was potential light pollution, noise, flies, smell, etc., by blocking off the elevation that was causing the most offence the last time. We have, in doing so, we've had to then reorganise things to feed the animals indoors, which has meant that the shed has had to be wider than the original one, so hence the fact this is bigger than the one that was refused before. So that's pushed it further out. So there's a lot of additional expense to try to accommodate the other parties as well here with it. And if the comment is, yeah, fine, it's taken 3 years to get this through, but in the meantime, the business is desperately in need of the investment here. They're trying to make best do with what is presently there, and we're trying to bend over backwards to try to get something that ameliorates everybody else. We thought we'd overcome all of the issues in the previous refusal, to find out when we get the report on this one that there's this reference to aspect. And if you look at the dictionary, aspect is view and viewpoint, and as you've been told repeatedly over the years, there's no right to a view. Again, the reference to aspect of this new approach that's being looked at here, because the officers, remember, did not, they thought the previous shed, which is the same scale, impact on aspect, was fine. They recommended approval of it. Now this time, they've changed it. They're
30 seconds to go, David.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. This time they're coming back saying, oh, there's this aspect, there's this issue about it, making reference to the National Planning Framework as a document that's allowing them to see this new idea, and it's effectively making the policy clearer for you for any application at any point in the future. If you've got concern about aspect, it's now legitimised through this. The National Planning Framework is a document for the economic development of Scotland for the next 20 years. It's the assessment and setting down
presentation
of
to
the way.
conclusion, David, please.
Okay, thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, David. That was prompt. Thank you.
Oh, no, sorry. Well, I took a telling for a change, Jim, so.
Thank you. Members, any questions for David? Ivor?
Mr. Fallis, could you just address the fact that you said you addressed the main reasons, which were the siting and orientation of the proposed agricultural building together with the open-sided? So what have you done to address the siting and orientation, please?
We tried to address the siting and the orientation and looking at the overall package for the whole of the steading itself. Trying to rationalise the siting aspect on the basis of take it somewhere else? Is there another, feasible location roundabout that we could use? And it transpired that it was not, without a phenomenal amount of underbuilding. It would significantly add to the cost of the shed and mean that, whether or not it was supportable for the business point of view either, it was going to come into conflict with the design guidance that you have set down now that, advises conclusively against setting out platforms, putting things on mound, and significant degrees of underbuilding. Now, the design guidance is maybe used more so for like houses in the countryside or, housing developments in towns and villages and things like that. But the design guidance is for all developments. It can be used for, commercial, industrial, agriculture is here, as well as the sort of more mainstream likes of residential part. So it kept bringing us back to the fact, okay, we can't overcome all of the issues in the reason for refusal. We've sought to address the majority, we've addressed the majority of them. Orientating it so that it's flipped on 90 degrees means that the shed extends far out into the field, and there is quite a significant drop in levels, which again brings us into the realms of additional mounds, underbuilding, sculpting it, try to form it, etc., etc. And, it's, as I said in the presentation, it's a bit of a rock and a hard place. Okay, it's maybe not the ideal situation and solution. We would have gone for that had there been an ideal solution, but it's kind of the one that we've got presently before you.
Okay, Ivor. Ian.
Thanks, Chair. Mr. Fallis, you made reference to this loss of aspect and reference to the National Planning Framework. Is this really the first time throughout this process, given that you spent 3 years trying to develop it? Is this the first time this has become a major issue, or has it come up before?
It's fresh to me in the process when we got the actual committee report what the situation was, because we thought we'd overcome the majority of the issues relative to the last application there itself. And there's reference within the report that as a consequence of things within the National Planning Framework, it's introduced this element of aspect and the preservation of amenity in that sort of regard. So that was the first we were aware of it.
Members, any other members for David? Thanks very much for the presentation, David. Just take your seat again. Okay, members, we're now in session. Tom?
Thanks, Chairman. I mean, having gone on the site visit there, I think one thing that those of us who were on the site visit was the amenity of the objector that coloured our decision, if you like. Well, whilst I respect the fact that the applicant is trying to run a business, I don't think it should be taken away from the fact that if that was allowed to go ahead, the objector would lose a great deal of the amenity they currently enjoy. So I'm quite happy to move the recommendation, Chair.
Okay, Tom. Any other member? Peter?
Happy to second.
Are there any alternative views to the proposal being set? In that case, it's a unanimous decision. Lucy, can you confirm the decision of the committee, please?
A motion put forward by Councillor McCoftry to go with the recommendation to refuse this application. This has been seconded by Councillor Diggle.
Thank you, Lucy. Thanks, members. We go to item number 6. Erection of dwelling house and formation of access road at Tonderghie Road, Isle of Whithorn. The application type is full planning permission. Reference number 15/P/10253. Recommendation to refuse. And the case officer is Billy Murray. Billy, if you just take us through your presentation when you're ready, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As you say, this is an application for the erection of a dwelling house and formation of a road at Tonderghie Road, Isle of Whithorn. This shows the site location on the southern edge of the Isle of Whithorn. This is the application site from the southeast. And a similar view from the southeast. You'll see from the proposal that the site is on the higher part of the larger paddock within which it is located. There would be a certain amount of excavation that's described in the report to lower levels there in an effort to minimise visual impacts. That's a view towards the site from the northeast with the access track as it is, as existing. An access track was formed in relation to a previous approval, which has now been completed for a single dwelling house, which has now been completed. That's a view towards the site from an easterly direction at lower level, looking up towards the site. The new dwelling house would sit to the rear of the gabled bungalow in the foreground there, and just to the left of the other gabled bungalow behind. That's a view back towards the site from Port Briarcroft driveway. Port Briarcroft is the single house that sits separated from the main part of the Isle of Whithorn by the paddock within which this site is located. That's a view looking back along the access route to the new dwelling house. Where I'm standing is actually on the track that would go beyond the access to this particular proposed dwelling house. Behind me, if you will, that access track goes on to serve other dwellings beyond. The access to the new dwelling would curve round to the left, past the new house. This is another view of the access track as existing, closer to Tonderghie Road. And this is the access route where it leaves the paddock. There was reference to, in Road's comments and advice and design, to a restriction at Miller's Byre in terms of visibility for vehicles and for pedestrians crossing at that point. And that was in terms of the stone pillar and wall you see there, particularly the pillar. So that slide was to highlight that restriction. Largely reasons given for refusal in terms of visual impact and the like are in terms of important views from parts of the conservation area and the harbour. So this is a view from the harbour back across towards the site. You can see the single house at Port Briarcroft, the grey house on the left, and then there's a gap between them to the village itself, which is the white dwelling houses. This is a zoomed in view to make that a bit more clear. The single dwelling house on the left at Port Briarcroft, and the main part of the Isle of Whithorn to the right, with the gap between, and significant importance is attributed to that gap in the report and indeed in previous reporters' decision on a previous appeal. This is a similar view from the main street, so this is coming around onto the main street again, looking across the harbour area towards the site, and again zoomed in just so that you can see more precisely where it is. This is a view over the site from the U77 on the approach to the village from the west. Again, the house would sit in the gap between the single house on the right, which is Port Briarcroft, and the roof of the house on the left. Later amendments were made to the proposal in this case where it was lowered by a further 500 millimetres to try and reduce the impact from here and indeed from elsewhere. And there are visualisations later in the presentation that will highlight that. This is a view just looking from the A77 between two existing houses, and the house would sit in the gap between, but beyond the garden that you see there. So these are submissions from the applicant. This is the location plan, site plan, floor plan, and elevations. So these are photomontages prepared and submitted on behalf of the applicant. So that shows the proposed dwelling. That's a similar view to one of the images I showed, looking from Main Street effectively across towards the application site. This is another one from a similar location, again showing a photomontage of the proposed dwelling house. And this is one from the harbour area, again a similar view to an image that I showed earlier. And this is the one I referred to a moment ago, an equivalent view to the image I showed, where the house would sit in that gap. The red lines are to represent where the roof line would be of the proposed dwelling house, and clearly show what kind of impact it would have on views across to the sea and the harbour area from that aspect. This is just a plan prepared by myself just to show the extent of the conservation area relative to the site. You see the site is the shaded red area in the extreme left point, just below the public road. So the recommendation is to refuse for the reasons stated.
Thanks, Billy, and I'm glad David had the foresight to invite our roads officer here, Ken Druitt. So I think we can take both questions for case officer and roads officer at this moment in time if members are satisfied with that. Any questions, members, for the case officer or the roads officer at this point in time? Stephen?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. Okay, so on page 29, where it shows the consultation with the roads officer, it speaks about the 6 dwelling houses being served by the private way or road. And then it suggests that formal road construction consent would be required to bring that to an adoptable standard. I think then, I'm reading that in context of page 39, 420, 4.20, where there was an application 10/P/1/0213. I don't know how many houses were there at the time. I'm assuming it would be 5 or 6, but I'm just wondering why that road's consent wouldn't have been required then. And also, there's a wee note there saying, notwithstanding any action on the matter, which clearly hasn't been resolved in terms of a condition to the satisfaction of what was agreed, I think, would be deferred pending determination of this application. So it's really just to understand when this road's consent would have been required. Is that just more recently that that's needed, and how that sits in the context of paragraph 4.20?
Ken, do you want to deal with that?
Thank you, Chair. The history for this site is that there has been advice consistently that because the intent or the seemed intent was to access an area of land that was sufficient to accommodate a number of dwellings, and indeed several of the applications that have come in the past have indicated 3 dwellings at least at the rear of the other houses. The intention has always been that it would be desirable on road safety grounds to have an adoptable road. That remains the case. So if we look at the advice that's been proffered by the local office and more recently the hub, the advice has always been that it should be an adoptable road on road safety grounds.
Thanks, Ken. Okay, Stephen, you want to come back?
Thank you. Thanks for that answer. I don't know if that helps me too much, though, especially in relation to 4.20. Clearly, there was some details of an agreement there, it suggested, and that this condition, there's no record of it being fully discharged. So you've got a kind of an application that was granted, or permission, sorry, on 10P/10213, and this seems to just sit contrary to that advice that's been given. So maybe it's the case officer that needs to answer that.
The case officer might be able to help you as well, Stephen. Billy?
Yes, Chair, I think I can perhaps address that, and just for clarification purposes. Road standards effectively are that any more than 2 dwelling houses require an adoptable road. There have been variations in the past between the east and the west, where in the west sometimes 3 dwelling houses were accepted by a private road, in other words, an unadopted road. As Ken has said, as the roads officer has said, consistent advice from roads officers has always been that it should be an adoptable road, because clearly, in total, with houses proposed and existing, that road would always have exceeded certainly the criterion of 2 dwelling houses, and indeed also that of 3. In terms of planning history, the house that was approved, the single house that was approved in 2010, succeeded a previous application for 3, which was refused, and indeed before that for 4, which was withdrawn. Advice from roads officers at that time still was that in terms of road standards, it should have been an adopted road. So effectively, the acceptance that the single house would not carry a requirement for an adopted road was a relaxation of that standard, because it was felt, you know, taking things in the round, that a relaxation was acceptable there because the house was acceptable in all other areas. This situation often comes up and has come up in the past where you've got a road standard, because at some point, when is enough enough? And because if you don't draw a line at some point and you just keep getting incremental proposals for one house, you know, at some point you've got to say it must be an adoptable road. And I think that you know, it's fair to say that that point has been reached in this case.
Last time, Stephen, you've been quite specific, the information you've had.
Yes, and I think there's a very specific answer I'm looking for, which is just to tie up my original question. There is no record of this condition having been fully discharged, and the private access remains incomplete. So we're sitting with a condition that 6 years later isn't complete. So that's really, I think, where I'm honing in on my concern.
Billy?
Yes, Chair. I think that paragraph also goes on to say that any action in that regard has been deferred pending determination of this application. I mean, there have been ongoing issues with the 2010 development in terms of compliance with conditions for a significant number of years. And you'll see from the planning history that there was a previous application for this same site last year that was withdrawn before it went to committee. So officer's view has been that it would be unreasonable to pursue compliance with that condition until final determination of this application. And reference in the report to the incompleted nature of the existing road is simply in reference to, you know, the footway and whether that has been formed in accordance with what was agreed. Rightly or wrongly, our view was that it would be unreasonable to pursue that while there were live applications in the system, if you will. When this application today is determined one way or the other, either there will be a requirement for a different road, or if committee goes with the recommendation, there would be a requirement to pursue compliance with previous approval.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Billy, for that. Any other member, Ian? No? Okay. If there are no other members, then we'll go to the applicant, Mr. R. Barton and Mr. David Fallis. You have 3 minutes collectively. And I'll remind you again with 30 seconds to go. And again, whenever you're ready, David.
We made a request for the photo montages. Would it be possible to go back to them? Thank you. First one, please. Yes, thanks. No, that's it. Cheers. Thanks. To save the councillors trying to best guess what the site will look like at the end of it by whatever the case officer says, whatever I describe. We had some photo montages prepared to show you know, what the house, or how big an impact the property is going to have. And please bear in mind that since the preparation of these, we've offered to reduce the house by a further 500 millimetres. This particular vantage point is at the car park in front of the community hall. Again, we picked this point because we thought there'd be quite a lot of people there and having a view and aspect up to it. So we thought it was fair and reasonable to have that as a popular view itself. So you can just see that the house may, you know, parts of it are visible. You know, we accept that. Photo montage 2 is taken at the corner of that road as it goes along in front of the pub and along to the harbour itself. And again, we show there, and there's a presentation, you know, there's reference in the report about hipped roofs are wrong, but there's a gable projection there as part of the feature, fits in with the rest of it. And if we can move on to view 3, which is at the car park beyond the harbour, again, the busier car park, the most popular place that people are likely to congregate. And we thought we'd just try to show the house within the context of all that is there. We have maintained the gap to Port Briarcroft, as was the case before, despite the fact that at this angle you're actually shortening it, because we are quite far beyond. There's reference in the report regarding the fact that hipped roofs are not acceptable, But when you look at the context there is a mix and match of all manner of roofs there. There are gables, there's an orange terracotta tile hipped roof just on the other side of Tonderghie Road, and just to the back right of the house there's a series of mono-pitched houses themselves. The houses that are there with the gables are on different orientations as well, so roof planes and roof slopes are it's quite a complicated view in that context, and we submit that the hipped roof is not going to be so offensive or look out of place, as is alleged. There are comments about underbuilding, that seems a popular comment today, about underbuilding and having to cut the site in.
30 seconds to go, David.
We've done that on the basis of all the other plots have got that as well. It's not out of common. And with regards to the roads and the access part of it here, it's maybe wrong. The thing is, it's a private road that's there just now. It's not on the council's list of council-maintained roads. Therefore, it is a private road. And Class 9 of the permitted development orders allows Mr Barton to make any changes,
Can you just draw
improvements.
to conclusion now, David, please?
Yes, thank you. Any changes or improvements to that particular road under his permitted development rights. And it's disappointing to find issues about conditions not being fulfilled when we've had 5 years, we've submitted the information,
David.
and we've thought it was fine, and now we're coming to it 5 years later. Very disappointing to see.
Thanks, David. Thanks for that. Any members have any question for the applicant or agent? Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. The 2 points I've wrote down is potential breach of condition and the road design standards, and David, you started to touch on that. I wonder if you could expand.
Just maybe a second. Oh, thank you. The breach of the condition thing, like I say, we submitted the information. We've got it on record that it was submitted and lodged with the department. I think it was in 2011. And nothing's come back. We've had a series of applications, and rightly or wrongly, maybe we should have pursued it. You know, maybe they could have come back and said, no, that information is not acceptable. You're going to have to change it. There could have been some kind of dialogue, and we could have actually sorted something out or come to the arrangement for it. And fair enough, okay, there have been applications in the meantime. It may have put things on hold in that regard. But if it's matters that can be resolved and worked into what a final scheme is going to be, then that's okay. You know, we're happy to deal with that, but we need the feedback, we need the communication to help us to do that. With regards to roads and construction consents, etc., maybe there was an error in our description in putting in the fact that we are wanting to put in a road, because when roads, your roads colleagues see that, they think, right, it's got to be to adoptable standards. Maybe we should have put in improvements to private access, which is what it presently is. Because, again, there's reference about needing for lamp standards. Now, between the access point here, up Tonderghie Road to the 30-mile-an-hour limit, there are 5 lamp standards presently. Along Tonderghie Road itself, there are 11. And all we're doing is putting a wee house up the back where you'll probably get light cast from elsewhere. Now, surely the lighting that's there is sufficient for that purpose. Now, we've been trying to work to try to get an arrangement. Okay, if it's going to have to be adoptable, then fair enough, we are trying to work with that. But whilst the stone wall and gate pier at the access onto Tonderghie Road is above 105 metres in height, which is said, the consultations are saying that it's too high, there's an obstruction in the visibility splay. It's never going to get adopted. Roads are not going to take that on. And that's beyond our control. That's the person that has the house at the corner who's built that wall and that gate pier, and it's been referred to in constantly and repeatedly within applications that it's a danger to road safety. It's not to standard, and it needs to be resolved. But again, nothing's been done with that, and it's not for us to go along and take the coping stones off or remove it in height, because it's not our property. And again, I would rest the fact as well, if it was such a bad scenario, if it was such a threat to road safety, then surely something could have been done by now. And not just through the planning regulations. Roads have, through the Road Scotland Act, all manner of powers to control what happens. And they don't need to take on a road that is not up to adoptable standards unless it meets their standards. They don't need to bother with it. They can just turn their back on it, just like at Rosy Spray, the little road just up the road from it with the estate off that. Again, that's not a council-maintained road, but it's been laid out, but it's not maintained because it doesn't meet standards. So there's no obligation to do it.
Okay, and any other member, Ivor?
The pillar and wall, is that a road obstruction for cars using the main road or for cars using your proposed access? As it says in the papers, it's for cars using your proposed access.
It's my understanding that it's as you're coming out of a private road, as you're looking up onto the public road, it interferes with the visibility from your car. So, you know, normally the conditions set out how far back it is. I don't know if it's 2.5 here or 4.5 back, and then it'll set a display, and it interferes with that, as said within the consultation response. And it's not beyond our control, but again, whilst they're talking about, you know, pursuing the client with regards to, you know, breach of conditions, etc., I can't honestly believe that that wall and gate pier was part of a condition for the other one. So maybe, you know, in the interest of parity, if you're actually making sure that this is going to fully comply, to afford an opportunity to make it fully adoptable, if that's desirable, then there's various issues to be addressed here. That's something to be taken into consideration.
I don't think it was the first time that this situation has occurred and plan approval has been declined because of a previous wall. And maybe Ken would want to address that issue. Can we legitimately approach the owner of the property that has that wall and pillar and ask them to remove it?
No, we can't.
So you have what you have, you have a situation that's in existence at present that you can't change. Members, any other questions for the applicant and his agent? In that case, thanks very much, gentlemen. If you resume your seats. Members are now in session. Alistair?
As far as I'm concerned, sir, the case officer's report sets out clearly and compellingly the planning grounds on which this application should be refused, and I have no compunction whatsoever in accepting these, and I would move, in fact, that the report be accepted on the basis recommended, and the application be refused.
Any other members? Any other members otherwise minded? Ian?
No, but I had my hand up for a question, Chairman, in regards to it. There was discussion around about permittable development rights, what the road design standards should be, what they should apply to, what they should adhere to, and I would just like to got that clarified for Ken, if possible, in regards to what was said by David there. I mean, I felt as if the case was made that when it comes to 5.2, I think it'll be within the report, the recommendation, refusal for roads. I don't know if that would, after what was said, I don't know if that was new information to the Roads Authority or not when it comes to that, because it sounds like it was never going to be up for it'll never be up to adoptable standards anyways, and that's what was being proposed. I just don't know if that was the understanding of the Roads Authority.
Well, I don't think we're getting back into debate because you have a proposal to go with the recommendation, but Billy seems quite keen to come in here, so I'll let Billy respond.
With your permission, Chair, it may help members to just clarify in respect of the question of this pillar. First of all, the pillar fronts onto a private access at this point. So the Councillor's Roads Authority has no control over that. In terms of planning, the erection of that wall and pillar was permitted development. The question of the second thing to say is that the dwelling house to which that pillar is related at Port Briarcroft, which is just to the left there. When planning permission was granted for it, it was subject to a condition that required the completion of the junction, the upgrading of the junction of this private access onto the public road at Tonderghie Road to be upgraded to council road standards. That has been done and that has been complied with. That pillar has no implications whatsoever for the public road as it stands at the moment. In terms of what was said and the impact of the pillar in terms of this report and indeed the previous report, the issue came up because as there have been a number of proposals for roads designs here, It does to some extent restrict visibility for cars travelling in the direction you see there and looking towards the public road. The other and perhaps even more important issue was that the road design as previously proposed showed a pedestrian crossing point there. Now what that meant was that pedestrians were expected to go right up to that pillar and then cross the road. What that meant was that cars coming into the site could not see the pedestrians for the pillar, nor could the pedestrians see cars coming towards them. So there's a combination of issues there. The other final point to make is that in terms of achievement of an adoptable standard road there, it is made clear in the report that that could be done. There is sufficient land, as I understand it, on the opposite side of the private access track from the pillar to facilitate a design which could leave the pillar where it is, but yet meet adoptable standards, and clearly any pedestrian crossing point could be adjusted accordingly. So I hope that has clarified things for members.
Thanks for that, Billy. Alistair Witts.
Just to formally second Councillor Geddes' motion.
Okay, members, we have a proposal and a seconder. There are no alternative proposals. Then the decision. Lucy, can you confirm members' decision, please?
And confirm that the members' decision, through a motion put forward by Councillor Geddes, to go with the recommendations in the report, which is to refuse the application. This has been seconded by Councillor Witts.
Thank you, Lucy. Go to agenda item number 7. Erection of new nursery building and 1.8 metre high timbered boundary fence and gates at Penninghame Primary School, Auchendoon Road, Newton Stewart. Application type is full plan permission, reference number 15/P/1/0293. The recommendation is to approve subject conditions and the case officer against Billy Murray. Billy, will you take us through your presentation, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is an application for a new nursery building at Penninghame Primary School in Newton Stewart. That's the site location plan, site outlined in red. It's to the south of Auchendoon Road. That's just a closer view. The site sits end on to Auchendoon Road, that part of Auchendoon Road, which indeed continues round the 90-degree bend down towards the bottom of that view. So that's all described as Auchendoon Road, but reference in the report to Auchendoon Road refers to the part running horizontally or near horizontally across that view. This is a view of the application site from the northwest, standing on Auchendoon Road. It's presently a grassed area within the play area of the primary school. That's a view from the other end of the site, looking from the southeast back towards Auchendoon Road. You'll see the existing residential development on the left, which is referred to in the report, and the school car park on the right in that view. That's just a similar view, but angled round slightly, giving a clearer view of the residential properties to the rear of the site. And this is from a different angle, showing where the site would be. Residential property on the left, Auchendoon Road behind the stone wall that you see in the distance on the right. And again, you can see the school car park in that view. That's looking back over the site from the school playground towards the residences to the rear. And that's a similar view, again, just showing the residential properties beyond the site from that view. And again, to complete that aspect. This is a view on the approach to the site from the east on Auchendoon Road, existing access to the school and school car park on the left. And that would be the existing drop-off area for both the school and the existing nursery, which sits beyond the main building, the main primary school building at the moment. This is a view of the site frontage to Auchendoon Road. Points to note in this view are particularly the narrow width of the footway, because reference is made to that in the report and indeed in the roads consultations, and that's an important issue. So that's a clearer view looking up Auchendoon Road, looking west. The site's on the left there. Again, note the narrow footway and indeed carriageway, and that's looking to the site again from Auchendoon Road, stone wall in the foreground. This is looking back down Auchendoon Road. That's me standing roughly at the 90-degree bend where there's a small one-way system round a triangle at that point. So that's looking back down Auchendoon Road. And that's just coming back down Auchendoon Road in the same direction. The site's immediately on the left in that view. Again, noting the footway and the restricted carriageway width, existing access to residential property on the left. These are a number of views. You'll have noted that the views of Auchendoon Road thus far had no cars on them. Given that that's a key issue, I have got a number of views showing what the issues can be on Auchendoon Road. I don't have any at drop-off and pick-up times for the school, but it's accepted that there is a significant issue there at that times. However, I hope this gives some flavour of the restrictions that there can be on this part of Auchendoon Road during the working day when cars are parked on this part of the road. So this is approaching to the school from the east. It's the beginning of Auchendoon Road effectively. So I see as the slide's moving up, cars are parked on the left where the parking is unrestricted, which narrows the carriageway. And again, even more so as you approach the school and the drop-off point. And this would be the drop-off point. And I think it's notable that reference is made in some of the representations to cars being parked in that drop-off lay-by where they shouldn't be parked. I think it's fair to say there may be an issue, and Ken may address this, there may be an issue where double yellow lines have not been replaced following resurfacing, but that's clearly a matter that could be addressed separately. This is just a couple of views to pick up on points made in representations about the limits of the existing footways. This is me standing on the kind of north-south section of Auchendoon Road, looking back towards the 90-degree bend and the small one-way system I referred to earlier. There is a representation that makes reference to the fact that the footway on the right, as you see it there, continues round from Auchendoon Road, but terminates there. That's standing at the same point, looking in the opposite direction. So the footway on the left terminates, and there's no footway on the left of Auchendoon Road at that point. And pedestrians would have to cross to get to the footway on the right-hand side. Again, these are a number of slides that have been put in specifically to address points that were raised in representations in terms of alternative accesses to the site, to the existing nursery building. So this is an alternative access to existing nursery via the library in St Ninian's Primary. So you can access the school if you go straight on up there. You can just about see in the distance the existing primary school. The building in the centre of the view is St Ninian's Roman Catholic Primary School. There's also an access from Princes Avenue, which goes past the rear of St Ninian's Primary School and goes through here, and again gets into the main primary school campus, which is the green area you see in the left and up to the right, in the foreground and up to the left. I think the point being made there was that had account been taken of the fact that not every pupil was dropped off on Auchendoon Road as things stand at the moment, and that the new location might drive all drop-offs to be at one location, which could intensify the issue. This is a view of the application sites for both this and the previously withdrawn application, showing the conservation area and listed building overlay. As much as anything, again, I put this in to clarify to members and address comments that were made in some representations about the previous application, whereby it was suggested that planning officers had said that one of the reasons the previous proposal was unacceptable was because it was in the conservation area. It was not within the conservation area, it was the setting of the conservation area that caused concern. But you will note that that previous site for the 2015 application in the centre there abutted the conservation area boundary, whereas the site for the present application is set away from the conservation area completely and has no impacts for the conservation area. These are the plans submitted with the application: location plan, existing site plan, Proposed site layout plan showing the proposed pedestrian access from Auchendoon Road, the building itself, and the outdoor play areas to the front. These are the proposed elevations showing the design, the materials and variety of finishes. That's proposed site sections to show how it would sit into the site. Relationship to the residential properties behind is shown. It's not that clear in that view, but I hope members can perhaps discern that. And this is the proposed floor plan of the nursery. Proposed fence detail. And this was a photo montage, again, produced by the applicants in support of the application and giving an impression of what the finished building would look like. So the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions, and conditions in particular requiring a 2 metre wide footway to be provided on the site frontage and the stone wall set back in an attempt to mitigate as much as is possible and practicable at this stage to attempt to mitigate the traffic impacts of the new proposal and other conditions in terms of traffic management plan and travel plan for the school. So the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions.
Thanks very much, Billy. And again, Ken remains with us, so we'll just have questions on both roads and application to officers, if that's all right. We've got a number of members wanting to speak. I think we'll get Ian Dick first.
Thanks, Chair. Could I just ask Mr. Murray, just when that photograph was taken there, because I'm not normally aware of that level of parking alongside the bowling green, except perhaps on a Sunday. Was that sometime during the week when there was an event on? And the other thing is, I take it to be your intention to be looking at the double yellow lines up round about the school.
In terms of the images that I showed, I don't think that was a particularly busy day. I think that was a normal working day. And certainly in my experience, where our council pool cars happened to be parked at the former primary school behind the bowling green, and on every occasion when I walk up there to pick up a pool car, it's like that. Parking is to that level. So it wasn't a particular event. I think that's pretty much routine. In terms of the double yellow lines, I think that's not a matter for me as a planning officer to address.
It'll be contained surely within the traffic management plan anyway, I'd have thought, Ian. Alistair?
No, thank you. I think I'll defer my question until we're in session.
Okay, I've got Peter Diggle, Jim McComb, and then Peter.
Thanks, Chair. But do you have a current view from the west at the moment, and then a view of the montage from the west?
Apologies. There's one photo montage that is from Auchendoon Road, which is to the north. And what was the other view?
Do you have a current view from the west, are you, without anything there?
That one?
Really looking for a view from the residential houses looking back towards the primary school.
I don't have a view from the residential properties looking back towards the school.
Okay, Peter.
Sorry, can I just one follow-up? How close is the building going to be to the residential properties boundaries?
I think it's referred to in the report. I think the rear wall of the new building would be 4 metres from the boundary at the moment. Paragraph 414, I think, addresses the distances. The proposed building will be set some 4 metres or so from the mutual boundary. The rear gardens of the properties there are in the region of 8.5 millimetres deep, giving a separation distance between the properties of some 12.5 metres.
Thanks, Peter. Jim and then Ivor.
Thanks, Chair. You mentioned, Billy, a 4-metre separation between the wall, the rear wall of the proposed building and the neighbouring properties. Now, understand there are 3 air extraction units which will go on the rear wall. It is indicated that these can be effectively mitigated by condition. What I want to know is, how loud is 5 decibel noise? Billy?
I don't know if I can describe to you in any meaningful terms what 5 decibels would sound like. I think I try to make it clear in the report that certainly in my experience, modern units such as that are very quiet. I had an occasion recently where I had an application for an extension to the rear of the supermarket in Stranraer, and I was on site where there are existing air conditioning units, and the noise from them was almost indiscernible. However, as a fail-safe, I felt it proper to recommend a condition whereby the final specification of these units should be agreed before any works commenced, and that would allow us the opportunity. They would have to provide that specification, including predicted noise outputs, give us the opportunity to take specific advice on those units from our colleagues in environmental standards, and ensure that any potential impact on residential properties was acceptable.
Jim?
Would you say, Billy, that for any of the neighbouring residents who were relaxing in their gardens or working in the garden, the noise would be almost imperceptible?
There's maybe a challenge that, Ian, Jim, because it depends what imperceptible is and how your hearing is. I think what Billy's saying is that environmental standards will be asked to ensure that the noise level that's acceptable is within what we would imagine would be reasonable everyday noise, because there's noise in every environment anyway. Billy?
Yes, Chair, I think you've more or less addressed it for me. And again, I do mention it in the report that you're working on a baseline of an existing school playground. So whether or not people in the rear gardens could hear the air conditioning units, when the school's in session, they could be hearing a lot of other noises as well anyway. So there is that baseline from which you've got to work.
Thanks, Jim. You want to come back finally, okay?
Will the air extraction units be working constantly?
Billy?
Chair, I'm afraid I don't have information to answer that question specifically, but yes.
I would think, again, if it's a heating system, it'll have to function during day and night to maintain a certain level of temperature within the building, but I presume they'll be controlled, and maybe Larry can address that when he comes forward to represent the applicant's position. Ivor?
Chair, just in line with an earlier application, what weight was given to the loss of aspect to the two residential properties?
Billy?
I think the same weight I would always give.
Very blunt. But I suppose there is a school there, Ivor, and what we're saying is...
Appropriate weight, I think, is the answer.
David wants to add a bit.
Yes, if I can assist, Chair, then I think the sections through the site show the topography and the relationship of the buildings in relation to the proposed building, which is, if you're making comparisons to the Kilfillan one, then obviously we're talking about a much lower building, and it's actually set down from the adjacent properties as the sections there show. I mean, I appreciate that members can't really see too clearly. I can see it better in front of me, but that's the height of one of the adjoining properties there, which then drops down, so you can see that there is a change in level.
Yeah, Ivor. Any other member? In that case, we'll go into the next phase. Then we have two objectors, and then we have Lauren representing the applicant. So firstly, can I have Hugh Leslie, please? And again, Hugh, you'll be afforded 3 minutes, and I'll remind you with 30 seconds to go, just to bring your presentation to a conclusion. And just whenever you're ready, Hugh.
Thank you. Members of the committee, my objection to the proposed planning permission is simply the fact that the recommendation by the roads officer is to widen the footpath along the entire school front, whereas Mr. Murray's recommendation is to widen the footpath only along the front of the site entrance. 1/5 of the road's recommendation, a difference of roughly 80 metres. Auchendoon Road has had a long history of reported safety concerns. The roads officer notes the concerns being raised by police, parents groups and others relating to pedestrian congestion, vehicle congestion, and the fact that the school bus struggles to get to the school, let alone park safely. And this is all before any additional impact of the new nursery has been taken into account. Surprisingly, I had to phone both the roads officer and Mr. Murray last week to point out that the current nursery has 2 entrances, and I find out 3. One on Auchendoon Road and one on Church Street, and the nursery sits approximately the same distance between the 2. Without any figures to work from, it would be reasonable to assume that 50% use each entrance. By moving the nursery to proposed location, the only entrance will be from Auchendoon Road. This would mean not a 4% increase suggested by the case officer, but a 104% increase. On a road where the footpath is already congested, the road is already congested, and public transport isn't safe because the bus cannot get parked. Under the case officer's recommendation, even if some parents and children continue to use the Church Street entrance and walk through the school, they still have to walk on an unwidened footpath on Auchendoon Road. And it's unlikely any parent will want to walk the extra 250 metres through the school on a rainy day. If the roads officer's recommendations are ignored, then the footpath from the existing drop-off point to the nursery entrance will not be sufficient for 2 pedestrians to pass each other, or even a buggy to fit. Please let me remind you that these children are as young as 2, so it's likely to be a significant number of buggies and children wanting to hold parents' hands. It doesn't matter how much the school is going to stagger the nursery start times. It doesn't change the fact you cannot push a buggy along that pavement. Case officer finishes by noting that development may be a driver in progressing further improvement measures on Auchendoon Road. However, I put to you that since the council budget doesn't look like it's going to improve anytime soon, the other priorities will always take precedent until something awful happens.
You have 30 seconds to go here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know there's a lot of political and financial pressure from the Scottish and the local government to get this nursery up and running. But by ignoring the road's recommendation, you are risking the lives of children as young as 2. Thank you very much. If the committee decides to come and do a site view, I'll more than happily lend them a buggy that they can try and push down the pavement.
Thanks. You can just remain for a minute in case any member has a question for you. Ivor?
Mr. Leslie, in our papers, the council road officer consultation is that no objection subject to conditions regarding footway widening and relocation of boundary wall on site frontage to Auchendoon Road. And in the conditions within the recommendations, it's unless and until a detailed scheme of footway widening, including relocation of existing stone boundary wall along the site frontage to Auchendoon Road. Where's the difference there between the roads and the...
There was an internal memo on the planning permission website from the roads officer, and I'll read the paragraph that's appropriate to this. It would be appropriate that prior to this proposed nursery to come into use, a scheme of footway widening that will necessitate relocation of the existing frontage boundary wall along the school frontage be submitted, approved in writing and implemented in full at the applicant's expense. I think that's clear, that that's school frontage, not site frontage.
That's fine. You never need to be in session. We can revisit that. Patsy?
Do you have a solution?
To the problem, the whole problem of Auchendoon Road? No, I don't. And I come here to you today fairly sensibly saying, let's widen the footpath along the school. I understand that this road's always going to have problems, but as a bare minimum, what you can do is widen that 80 metres of in front of the school. And that will be a very, very good start and improve children's safety dramatically. I'm not suggesting that this application is rejected or that the school isn't built or the nursery isn't built, but I think something needs to be done to Auchendoon Road and more than what Mr. Murray is suggesting.
Thanks, Patsy. Alistair?
Thank you. Mr. Leslie, the paragraph 3.1 on page 51, which refers to grounds given for objection, traffic congestion, third bullet point says, and I quote, voluntary one-way system at peak times, known only to parents and not more widely to other road users. Is that a potential measure to alleviate the problem, in your own opinion?
I live on Auchendoon Road, and outside of school pickup times, it's a very quiet road, and a one-way system would affect the local residents. I don't have an objection to putting in a one-way system permanently. It means I would have to drive a little bit further, but quite frankly, I think that children's safety is far more paramount in this. And I think, as you're all aware, that voluntary one-way systems, it just takes somebody going the other way and the whole thing collapses.
Thanks, Alistair. Ian? Oh, Lucy seemed to think you wanted to speak, Ian Blake, no? Okay. In that case, if there are no other members, you'd like to take a seat again. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And the next objector is Colin McCreath, please. You will have the same 3 minutes, Colin, and I'll remind you with 30 seconds to go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to begin by referring to the case officer's report, paragraph 4.5, where he says it is acknowledged, matter of record, that there are significant existing issues on Auchendoon Road in terms of congestion. He does split it between pedestrian and vehicular access. Why, when this condition is known, is there any suggestion of putting a school entrance on an already congested road? The footpath issue is slightly a red herring here. The amount of traffic on the road is way beyond what can be sustained. Moving on, in the case officer's report, paragraph 416, and I quote, he says that the area proposed to be utilised may be described as either unused or little used. This is wrong. In recent times, the school had to replace the fence along the entire boundary of the property at number 10. And the reason the school had to do that was the activities of all the children playing in the area damaged the fence. This proposal takes away the only level area that those small children have to play in. As been illustrated, the site slopes upwards in a southerly direction, so naturally the children gravitate towards the level area where this building is proposed. This is surely contrary to the ethos that Dumfries and Galloway have established in terms of obesity amongst children. If you're taking away an area where the children play, how can we expect them to exercise? So for that reason alone, this proposal in its present site should be refused. Come back to the access to the school. This proposal focuses the access for all children to come through a single point on Auchendoon Road.
You have 30 seconds to go, sir.
The present site, where it is, allows children to come in by 3 access. Mr. Murray made that clear in his presentation. Those other 2 routes will be denied to the families, and they will all come to this part of Auchendoon Road, which is already identified as a problem area. Another reason for this planning committee to reject the application in its present format. And
Can you bring your presentation
yes,
to a conclusion,
I
please?
recommend that the site be found within the extensive school grounds, which would allow the continuation of access through the 3 existing points.
Thanks, Mr. McCready.
Thank you.
Do any members have any questions for Mr. McCready? In that case, we'd like to take your seat, sir. Thank you very much. We now have the Lauren Foss representing the applicant. Lauren, you will again have 3 minutes, and I'll remind you with 30 seconds to go. And I know there are a couple of issues to be addressed by members. That will come later. If you just do your presentation now, that would be good. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to give a rationale and the background to this as a planning application, the Children and Young People Scotland Act 2014 places a legal duty on the Council to provide increased preschool provision from 476 hours up to 600, but it also includes provision for eligible 2-year-olds. To be eligible, you need to be in receipt of certain benefits. So the key driver for the change in the provision is to accommodate the 2-year-old agenda here more than the increased number of hours. That's why the facility has to have additional space, different fit out, different facilities within it. The national average of 2-year-olds that's projected is 27% across the number of 3 and 4s that you currently have. So within I hesitate to use the word catchment area for nurseries because they don't exist, but within the area that the nursery supports, that looks to be between 8 to 10 pupils at most. We have considered other options, other locations for the siting of a new facility, not just within the curtilage of the Penninghame site, but also within Newton Stewart itself. Another option was Minigaff. However, there's a third-party provider operating out of there, and siting a council-run facility within there would have a detrimental impact on that as an independent business. The current provision is a 30-30 provision. The extended capacity accommodates the 2-year-olds plus scope for additional 3 and 4-year-olds if the facility, obviously the new facility, there's going to be a possibility of further extended numbers in there. There are, however, very limited third-party providers within the Newton Stewart area, so that's why this facility, the numbers for it are fairly well known for it. There's very strong evidence based on high-quality early learning and childcare having a really good impact on the best start in life for children. The facility itself is a much more modern, much more spacious, much more state-of-the-art facility compared to the existing one that's there just now. The addition of 2-year-olds coming into this facility as well is strongly linked to employability opportunities for the families that are in receipt of the certain benefits that would be eligible for this. So if I move on to some of the questions that are asked, Chair, is that okay?
30 seconds, Joseph. If you're happy with that, that's
I'm happy
fine.
with
You have
that,
one
yeah.
question initially from Jim McComb. Jim, would you like to ask that question, please?
Thanks, Chair. My question in relation to the air extraction units, Lauren. Now, mitigation suggests they can be cut down to 5 decibels. What is the significance of that for the neighbouring residents?
The conversational decibel level in this room I tested a minute ago on my phone, and it's sitting between 50 and 65 decibels. Normal conversation is between 50 and 60 decibels. So 5 is, you'll hardly be able to hear it, in all honesty. We have the same facility at Shawhead, at the new school that was provided there. The same company provided it, it's the same spec. You can hardly hear them at all. In terms of, there was another related question in terms of when will they operate. They'll only be operating when heating is required for the facility. Now the council operates a period of no heating within any council property between April and September, so they will be off then, but they're only operational when the temperature drops below a certain level and they have to kick in to provide that temperature increase. And the way that they operate, it's an external fan on the appliance that's rotating that gives off the noise from them, so it's very limited that will be on. In the winter periods when it's got to get up to temperature, they will be operating out of core hours, particularly on a Sunday, for example, to get the core temperature back up to where it should be. But in all honesty, the building is so well insulated that it retains its heat efficiently.
And I think that was maybe the question, would it, I think it wasn't phrased in a way, would it just be operating during school hours, but that was sort of the sentiment behind that question, but clearly that's not the case, there'll be other times, but it'll be limited, and that's good to know. Patsy?
Yes, it's just the 2 points that were made, I think, by Mr. McCreth. Well, I just wonder why you've chosen this site. I'm looking at our site plan on page 47, and does the whole site of Penninghame School, is it in behind the Chapel of Rest there? So, I mean, that seems like an awful blank space, if you don't mind me saying. I just wonder why you've tucked it in somewhere that's taking away a green space, that's causing the accesses to go from 3 to 1, which so it seems to be exacerbating already a problem and making it worse. And I just wonder why that site has been chosen.
The original site that was selected on the previous planning application was further down to the right of the picture there. The area, though, by the Chapel of Rest, the large area there is actually a sports pitch. So it's a grass football area in there that's shared between Penninghame Primary School and St Ninian's, because they're a clustered partnership with a single head in there. The grassed area behind is absolutely a grassed area, and the pupils will move to that area to use that for all facilities. But the reality is they've got all the peripheral areas around the school to use. What it offers is a facility that addresses the road, where when you look at the travel plan of all the pupils that come to the school, where you look at how they arrive, whether it's by foot, by bus, the majority come in on Auchendoon Road, which I would anticipate is why there's such a pressure on that road itself. So by putting the facility, meeting that there, welcoming the nursery parents in, it may aid in getting them off the pavement, off the road, and alleviate a little bit of pressure for the ones that walk in there. The other access routes to the facility still remain. They're not being blocked off, closed off, because they're used by the pupils, the P1 to P7 pupils to the school with their parents. So they have, yes, it's further to go because the facility's in a different location, but the routes to get there are still there.
So in that case, could it be that the other routes could be pupils going to the primary school or the school could be encouraged or perhaps made to use those other routes, leaving this route into the nursery school just solely for the nursery school? Would that be possible? Because, I mean, again, I think Mr. Leslie said that, and you've said yourself that it's primarily for the 2-year-old agenda. Well, that is buggy movement, basically, isn't it? And he's saying that there isn't really room for buggies. There certainly isn't room for one buggy to meet another buggy. So, I'm just wondering how we can help to alleviate the problem. And I wonder if there's been thought given to that. And making them use, just making the nursery school use that entrance, and not everybody.
That's certainly something we'll discuss with the head teacher for the school. There is a travel plan in place that shows the route into the grounds that all pupils use, nursery and the P1 upwards. In terms of the 2-year-olds, we're predicting 8 2-year-olds using the facility split across the full day, so that's across 2 sessions. How many will come in the morning, how many will come in the afternoon, I can't confirm at this stage. There will be other parents that will have siblings currently that are in pushchairs. This, I think, is an issue that exists currently, irrespective of what the facility looks like, where it's located. And I think that's a challenge that sets for us to address one way or another, possibly outside this the nursery facility anyway.
Thanks, Patsy. I've got Stephen Thompson, Ian Carruthers, and then Alistair Witt. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. I hesitate to ask this because it's been asked quite a lot already, but just with the 5 decibels, okay, I think what we're looking at here is 5 decibels above ambient background noise rather than an actual noise of 5 decibels. So I suppose the question would be, what is the ambient background noise? We've had reference already to the background of children playing, so I don't know how many decibels that would be. We know that a conversation is about 60 decibels, so it would be plus 5 on top of that if we're going by the answers we've had already. So the condition number 6 says 5 decibels, no more than 5 decibels above ambient background noise. So we need to distinguish between 5 decibels and 5 decibels above the background. So it's just to help Councillor McComb on that one. Thanks.
I would presume if the report says above ambient noise, that's what it'll be. But you've also had Laran say that there's evidence that another school in the region has this system installed by the same company, and it has absolutely minimal effect on the general amenity of the area. So maybe you could just rehearse that, Lauren, because we clearly don't have, can't even say it right, environmental standards here today to offer a specific explanation. But Billy will do what he can once Lauren has reminded us of the installation that's actually functioning at the moment within the region. Stephen.
I took comfort in the answers that I've received already. I think the clarification was just the difference between talking about what 5 decibels is and what 5 decibels above the background is. I'm sure that all the mitigating factors will be addressed, but it's almost as if we're slightly ajar at what we're actually talking about in terms of 5 decibels.
Billy, is it 5 decibels or 5 decibels above ambient noise?
It's 5 decibels above ambient noise levels. That's the standard kind of wording of a condition for noise that you'll have seen many, many times, particularly in terms of wind farms. It's the same. And of course, the other point to mention in this context is that there are other controls in terms of noise under environmental standards legislation.
Thanks for that, Stephen. Ian.
Thanks, Jim. I just come back to the points that were made earlier by Mr. Leslie, Hugh Leslie. It's just clarity in regards to, is it site frontage that's being road improvements, widenings, or is it the site in which we've got control of, which I assume is the whole school frontage? They say the disparity between the length. I mean, Whitey was saying somebody quite sensible, to say the least, in regards to roads improvements. Taking into consider the plan authority, we don't take expense into consideration when determining a plan application. So I thought it sounds, so just clarity, I suppose, on that, Lauren. Is it just the site frontage as outlined within the page 47? Is it the whole site frontage we look to get improvements on?
Ian, I've asked that and we agreed we'd come back to the roads officer into session to establish exactly what's being done. Lauren can remain, maybe we'll ask that question, we go and say, no, we'll know. If it's a roads officer matter, just say that, because I've already asked the question and agreed to wait until the roads officer came back in.
I would confirm it's a road officer point for this because it's a recommendation that's been added to our existing planning application. So we haven't specified that specifically from an education perspective.
Okay. You like that, Ian? Alistair Witt.
Thank you. I understand why this application's here, and Lauren, you've already said that there is insufficient private provision in the area to deliver our statutory obligations in terms of the 2014 Act. However, the Act is also specific, I believe, this should be required reading, of course, for members of the Education Committee. It's specific in terms of flexibility. And in terms of paragraph 4.7, you outline that, the operating day when the children will be accepted to the unit, etc., etc. However, just for clarity, will the nursery be open during school holidays as well as school sessions?
At this stage, my understanding is that it's only open during term time. However, the early years team are working out basically what the parental demand is. The review on a 2-year cycle where they consult with parents about what their requirements are. Currently, the requirement was term time only, but if that changes, then that will be reviewed and adjusted to meet the demand. I think through the future direction of the Scottish Government, the reality of true flexible start, finish and term time against non-term time will come through, and we'll have a facility that will end up being 52 weeks a year, I would anticipate. But I'll leave that for my early years colleagues to confirm.
Okay, any other members? In that case, Lara, if you resume your seat, thank you very much. Ivor had a question, there's also dubiety about the difference between what's reported on the internet and what we have before us. So Ivor, you repeat your question, please, for Ken.
It's just that the consultation within the papers says from the officer it was along the site frontage, and that's the recommendation that the planning officer has picked up. However, there is an internal memo, I think Mr. Leslie mentioned about the school frontage rather than the site frontage, and it was just clarification on what was the point.
Billy, if you want to address it, or Ken, but we certainly need to establish exactly what we're talking about and what the actual area is. You can't do that, son, you've had your opportunity.
From the road's perspective, the intention is to try and achieve as much of a benefit as is at all possible in every instance. In this particular instance, my preference is clearly to widen the footway along the entire site frontage. As has been mentioned in the reports, I've discussed this with the Service Manager Network Strategy, and we would like to put in place steps to improve footways along Auchendoon Road over the entire length. But that's something that's going to cost a lot of money and it's going to take a lot of time. We would see this widening the footway along the site frontage as the first phase of an improvement to be delivered over a period of time as funds become available. There are some potential wrinkles, if you like, along the site frontage in the form of services which would have to be relocated, and I think there is further discussion required to ascertain the cost effectiveness of moving those. It's not going to be cheap, and that may restrict some parts of the footway being widened. But the recommendation, I think, and the condition is that we will sit down and we will look and try and achieve the very best that we can prior to any of the works commencing.
Billy wants to add to it, Ivor.
Yes, just to close the circle, consultation advice from roads officers is, by definition, advice. We as planners in assessing the application have to take that advice on board, and we have to decide whether or not such a condition is competent, whether it's reasonable, whether it's enforceable, whether it's practical. In this case, accepting the aspiration, and clearly, as Ken himself has alluded to, roads officers ask for a best case scenario, quite rightly so, but we have to put all that together with planning legislation, etc. And as I've said, competency, reasonableness. In this case, it was concluded that the recommendation should be for the site frontage initially, against the background of the aspiration by other means to widen the whole footway in the future. And again, of course, the condition is to be agreed. So from that point of view, there may be some flexibility. But at the moment, it is the site frontage only for those reasons.
Thanks, Billy. I've got just to establish that Ian's happy because he did try and ask the same question earlier, and I'll come to you, Patsy. Can we just do it one at a time? I did invite Ian and then you, Patsy, next, because he asked the question of Lauren earlier.
Right, well, mine was the two further points I'd like to have been clarified. One was what Patsy just asked, actually. I'm taking it for the previous slide that was up, Billy, before he started moving it. It was the red, what was outlined in red. But there's a slight, just beyond that, when you look on page 47, I've hatched it myself, but there's an obvious piece of pavement there that looks, to me, if we were to widen the road at that point with the site frontage, you've got a piece of land that then stick out and look a bit ridiculous. So I wondered if, would that be an option as a smaller measure that we could add on, as you referred to, maybe as a condition, to extend the condition. So it was, what is this, going back to Patsy's point she's raised, what is exactly the site frontage? We'll see the improvements, and there's is that another piece of, but it's long again, is that an option we could add into the condition?
I think the site frontage is up there partially, but Patsy, well, I'll ask David to just put this to bed once you've asked your question, Patsy, because that's Ivor said his question, Ian. And if it's the same roads thing, we can then put it to bed in a winner.
It wasn't. I didn't mean to interrupt, and I apologise to Councillor Colours. It was just, talking about the site frontage, and I think Mr. Leslie mentioned 80 metres, and I'm not quite sure where that starts and finishes and what we're actually dealing with, if I'm being honest, because I think it's really important that we get this right, because it doesn't sound like it's a very satisfactory solution.
I think Billy did say, though, it was as much as we could do initially, because that's within our control, and the aspiration was to do much more. But David, can you just...
Thank you, Chair. If I'm reading correctly what Mr. Leslie was saying, the site frontage, that is the planning application site frontage that we're talking about here. The school frontage would extend along here. So the point he was making was that this is only a fifth of that entire area along there. The difficulty that we have in planning terms is that we can only attach a condition under Circular 4/1998 that refers to this application. So the only bit that we can put a planning condition on is really that area along here. But it obviously goes without saying that that is within the council's control. So if through either roads and or education, there is some proposal to widen that area, and planning terms we will wholly support that, but the competency issue and the reasonableness issues, we can only look at that area along there, which is hence the wording of the condition that Billy's got.
That was actually helpful at the end of the day. Members, we are in session and we just allowed that meeting, that debate first because it was asked during the consultation process. I've got Alistair and then Archie.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, sir, standing that we are now in session, again, I have no hesitation in suggesting that we adopt the case officer's recommendations on the basis detailed in the report, and I would so move.
Thanks, Alistair. Archie?
Yeah, and I'm happy to second that, Chair, along with an action plan that the roads officers and education meet to see if there's something that can be done in the meantime with either extension.
Thanks for that. I've now got Peter, Ian, Dick and then Tom McCaughtry. Peter?
Thanks, Chair. If members were minded to want the winding for the whole 80 metres, would the way forward be to ask the council to resubmit this with the additional area in the application site?
No, because David has said we would wholly support as a planning authority if the application came forward in respect to the remainder of the distance. There's a condition being placed by Alistair and Archie that says the council should get into consultation to try and achieve that, and there's a competency issue. We can only establish the element of the area that we have. So that's already been dealt with, Peter, will it be in another fashion? What you suggest? If you're content with that, that'll be fine. I've got I had two others. Who was it? Ian, Dick and Tom McCaughtry.
Just to fully support the motion that's been moved and seconded.
Thanks, Ian. Tom?
I'm not going against the recommendation. What I would like is advice. I see we've got a couple of planning seminars coming up, and it's the use of the decibels to determine noise, because one thing I can remember from my school days is that decibels are not an arithmetical progression, i.e. 5 decibels is not 5 times 1 decibel. I think it's it climbs by multiples of 10. Therefore, 5 decibels is actually 50 times louder than 1 decibel. So I'd like clarification at future seminar, perhaps from our friends in environmental standards, as to why we're using this. Because it's one thing just to talk about 5 decibels, but 5 decibels could be 50 times louder than the ambient noise. So I'd like some clarification on that, because it's not as simple as it would appear to be here.
I hope you're not going to ask a question about decibels, Jim McComb. Jim?
Thank you, Chair. I assume Ken and his colleagues will be carefully monitoring road movements in relation to this site. And we have, at the moment, a voluntary one-way system. It may be that requires to be formalised.
I would hope the traffic management plan would deal with that, Jim, and I would hope that there would be a constant monitoring, especially when concerns have been raised by members of the public about traffic flow and about pedestrian safety. Ivor?
Chair, it seems funny that we're talking here about widening the road to make it more safe, when if we go to the other sort of side, not so much your actual delivering it on site, but other officers come and tell you, well, if you make the road narrower, it slows cars down. And I would think if you actually made that one way, it would increase speeds rather than slowing them down, because folk know there's nothing coming the other way. So I find it difficult to sort of balance one against the other, where in some situations we're told to narrow the road to make it safer, and in other situations we're told to widen it to make it safer, or maybe just widen it to give you parking spaces rather than anything else.
I thought it was widening the path, no the road.
Ken will deal with that very issue, and then we'll go to
The intention is to widen the footways because it is the footways which are dire along Auchendoon Road. You're quite correct that widening the road would increase speeds, but there's no intention to do that. I think that what has to be considered in respect of Auchendoon Road in the long term is to look at a package of measures that will make it safer for children to get to and from school, that will address the issues with regard to traffic. And it may well be that a one-way system is considered as part of that. It has been considered and discounted in the past by colleagues in the local office some years ago. It's not off the burner, and all options will be considered, but it'll be the solution to Auchendoon Road is not a simple one solution that sorts everything out. It's going to be a series of measures, but I think the most critical thing over the short term is to try and increase the footway width so that it's safer for people to actually walk along the footways. At the moment, as has been alluded to, you can't walk and you certainly can't pass anybody on the footways. And a pram or buggy will struggle.
Thanks for that. And now then, we'll have a proposal and we have a second that's been supported by a number of members, and there's an acknowledgement that we can't place a condition that the roads and education discuss the remainder of the extent of the school rather than the application site, but we certainly hope that that's what will happen, and we look forward to seeing some proposals come forward that illustrate that we've actually been working together to try and find a solution that satisfies the local community. So with that in mind, are we happy to go with the recommendations, the proposals put forward by Councillor Geddes, seconded by Councillor Driver? In that case, Lucy, can you confirm the decision, please?
I can confirm that the decision is put forward by a motion from Councillor Geddes, which is to go with the recommendation in the report to approve the application subject to the conditions, and this has been seconded by Councillor Driver.
Thank you. Come to agenda item number 8. Residential development at land at Stapleton Grange, Annan. Application type is planning permission principle. Reference number 16/P/4/0014. Recommendation is to refuse, and the case officer is Patrick Hanna. Councillor McKee.
Chair, just seeking a bit of clarity here, please. I wonder why this application has been called in, given the grounds of maintaining consistency of decision making. Given this application has been turned down 3 times, is that not consistent? I just wonder why that's been accepted as a condition for it coming before us.
David.
Chair, yes, it was one that was run past myself. I felt it was a competent planning ground looking for consistency and feeling that it was appropriate, given there had been a previous committee decision, that this one should also be called into committee for that reason. There was no grounds that I could see for rejecting that.
Okay. Pat, will you take us through the slides, please?
Thanks, Chair. The proposal relates to the steadings at Stapleton Grange, which are listed buildings and which over recent years have been sympathetically converted into a number of dwelling houses. Members will recall, as has been mentioned, that an application for 3 new dwelling houses to the rear of the listed steadings was refused by the committee following a site visit in November of last year. And that was refused on 3 grounds, which are set out on page 62 of the report. And the reasons for refusal relate firstly to the principle of development, and the development being contrary to housing in the countryside policy. Secondly, due to design. And thirdly, the impact of the design on the setting of the adjacent listed building. just to run through some of the slides. The application site itself is at Stapleton Grange, which is just east of Annan, north of East Riggs and south of Chapel Cross Power Station. This is the application site itself, bounded in red. The site contains the remnants of a hard standing from former agricultural buildings. This is a closer view of the site. And you can see that the proposed access point to the site is identified in the eastern corner. This is the application site to the right of the dwelling house. Just to the right of the dwelling house, you can see a sort of blue and white block, which is a caravan and storage containers, and that indicates the lefternmost extent of the site, which extends to the right just beyond the telegraph pole. This is moving forward and looking to the access to the site. As I said, the buildings along here are listed, category B listed. This is a reverse view looking east towards the site. The site is just behind the green garage that you can see in the mid-distance. And again, just to the right of the green garage, you can see a white block, which is the caravan, indicating the right extent of the site, and it goes out to just beyond the left of the tree shown on the side of the image there. Moving closer to look at the access again, and turning around to look into the existing access, and you can see better here the white block of the caravan and the blue of the storage containers. This is looking at the proposed access to the site and the existing rear boundary with an established hedge just behind that. This is stepping into the application site itself at the access point and looking to the right and panning left, looking across the site and panning left again, and the application site boundary is just off the left of the screen there. You can see that the site is starting to naturalise, and there's an element of self-seeding going on here. And this photograph, I think, was taken in March, so there's still a fair bit of a naturalisation to come over the summer months. And this is a reverse view from the rear of the site, looking back towards the steadings. The applicant has submitted this application to establish the principle of development, and they're hoping that would then allow for future discussion on the design. However, it should be noted that members have already refused the principle of development as part of the previous application. There's been no change in policy since the earlier committee meeting, other than the fact that Stapleton Grange is now identified as a small building group within the local development plan. Notwithstanding that identification, that doesn't mean that a small building group is necessarily suitable for development. There clearly has to be an appropriate site within any identified small building group. And this site is clearly to the rear of the existing buildings and doesn't relate to the existing character of the development. Furthermore, the proposal can't be considered as beneficial brownfield development, as firstly, agricultural land is excluded from the definition of brownfield land in the local development plan. And secondly, the site is not considered to be demonstrably intrusive, either visually or environmentally, which is the term referred to in the local development plan. And as can be seen from the photographs, the site is becoming increasingly naturalised. Finally, the supplementary guidance for the policy for housing in the countryside and for brownfield development notes that any replacement dwellings should be minimised to what is absolutely necessary to secure rehabilitation of the site. Were the development to be considered acceptable, then financial information would be required from the applicant to establish this, but nothing has been provided by the applicant to date. So for the reasons set out in the report, the proposal is considered to be contrary to policy and is recommended for refusal. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Pat. Members, questions for case officer? In that case, we'll go into session. Ivor, and then Jane.
Chair, maintaining consistency of decision making, I'd move refusal.
Jane,
I would second that.
Ivor, Ian.
Thanks, Chairman. Just like to say a few words in regards to this application. Just certainly my view in it, certainly as a local councillor to that area as well. I think we've looked at one earlier, an application earlier, and it was item 5. I think it was Kilfillan, and we looked at that similar kind of circumstance. I've spoken at this before. We've had a site visit. It's certainly not something I'd be asking for, and I went into a fair amount of detail last time in regards to trying to put it into context. Originally, this is part of the original farmsteading. What has now been converted and changed into a small building group. So that's been this without recourse to the council. This can be 2 portal sheds can be re-erected, and a silage clamp, silage pit, whatever you want to call it, can be re-erected. And that's, for me, and is it a brownfield site? I say without doubt it's a brownfield site, and there's obviously a discussion or an interpretation to whether it's one that's open for development or not. But in regards to the potential conflict, I think there is a potential conflict, and I do feel the principle of development should be supported in regards to this site. It goes back to the report also mentioned within the report itself was one over in Stranraer, I think. I forget which page. On page 63, I think it is. And it refers to 64 it was, planning 4P10654 and others, and it was supported at the time. Again, it was to provide a viable redevelopment of brownfield site, appropriately rounding off an existing residential development, and improve the setting and current character of the building, the listed building that was there. I think so. I mean, it's difficult. I mean, it's not been straightforward for me to bring this one, because there was a lot of discussion, but there was a view that potentially in regards to the principle it could have been supported, and I would support this. There's been no representation made against this at all. I think it does round off well the site that's already there. It would be certainly a betterment to the area. I know the locals in that area would actually like to see it happening. It would have a positive impact on the local economy, that's for sure. There is a demand. The question was asked at the site, is there a demand for these? And the answer was there's actually a waiting list. There's people queuing up for these. I mean, so there's a lot of aspects where I think the council could support this, and I would like to see it supported. So I would move that we do actually approve the principle. Fair enough, being previously, the thing I disagreed with more than anything was the contemporary or the very modernised type and style of the housing. So the design and style I thought was maybe a wee bit too much, and I think the rest of the committee did as well. But the principle I would support, so I would move that we do support it, and I'd reference the points in regards to the previous decision made over in Stranraer, particularly the 3 points there. But I'd like to hear what other members are thinking as well, Chairman. We've certainly got a motion on the table, but hope we'll find another view as well. Thank you.
Well, you've got a proposal in a second, Tom, and then I'll get Ian Dick.
No, I mean, I haven't changed my mind for the last time, because I think one of the things that struck us the last time was the fact that what was proposed was out of keeping. I think someone has made it clear if something came in that was more sympathetic to what was already there, probably give it some consideration. But I'm not prepared to go ahead and back something in principle. Again, as for consistency, I mean, other 2 cases that are mentioned were both against recommendation, but for 2 totally different reasons. I didn't support one of them, I supported the other one. And I think that you can't have consistency if you're going to go against recommendations. I should be judging every case on its merits in any case. So I certainly couldn't support this one going through today.
Ian Dick.
Thanks, Chair. this is an application for permission in principle for residential development. But just looking at the recommendation and the reason given, the proposed development would not result in the beneficial redevelopment of a brownfield site. And looking at that picture, a wee bit, I find that very much at odds. I'm going to support, if Councillor Carruthers has moved that, I would support the approval of this in principle, obviously given the fact that anything future in its design, its design qualities and so on would be taken into consideration. But I've no problem about doing that on the basis of socio and economic benefits and the potential increase of housing stock in Dumfries and Galloway, if that's acceptable.
You'll recall the planning officer said that an agricultural site is not a brownfield site, and you'll also have to give appropriate planning reasons for supporting a proposal like this. We've got a recommendation to accept the officer's recommendation, and that's seconded. So I look for planning grounds for a proposal to put forward an amendment, and it can't be on a brownfield site when agriculture doesn't provide for that.
Yeah, thanks. Stand corrected. Would it be appropriate if it was moved on the basis or seconded on the basis that there were socio and economic benefits that would allow it to be approved contrary to policy?
It's a guy vaguing because you could get every planning application submitted on that basis, but I'll get David to reply to it.
Chair, I'd suggest not for the reason that Pat actually gave in his introduction, which is that there's no economic viability case being actually submitted by the applicants to support this. The other issue that you put forward, I think, was the increase in housing stock. Well, given the some 7,000 sites identified in the local development plan, there doesn't appear to be a shortage of housing sites identified.
Looking for planning grounds, or I'm not accepting it here.
Well, I'll get clarity, Chairman. I mean, I'm saying it would be beneficial redevelopment of a brownfield site. We've got precedent. We'll go back to the one in Stranraer in particular, where it was almost like for like, other than the fact there was buildings there. It's the conflict in particular. I mean, I think there is is it aspect, is it amenity? Whatever way we want to describe it, there is a clear risk there if we don't allow this to be developed for residential and finish off the site and round it off. There's a chance there'll be two portable buildings in a child's clamp. So there is amenity reasons. I think there's certainly an impact in the local economy, small impact in the wider regional economy. But look, I'm not a professional planner, Chairman. Looking for advice in regards to that, and I certainly see it as being a beneficial redevelopment of a brownfield site. There's no doubt it is a brownfield site.
Can you move the image back to the very first one you did, Pat? That forward one, please. No, the one where it was marked out in red. That. Clearly that's no rounding off, that's an extension of a site, and that's made quite clear in the report as well. It's no rounding off. But I'll get David to give you advice on whether or no you can submit that proposal based on rounding off and based on brownfield sites, given what it says in the report about that.
Well, again, I would just refer members to paragraph 4.8 on page 66, where this makes that clear. Unfortunately, as we've alluded to in the past, the Stranraer case, we weren't aware of that particular part of the LDP glossary at the time of that application. Had we done so, I think we would have been a bit more forthright in what we'd have actually said. But it quite clearly says it excludes agriculture. So you can't regard this competently as being a brownfield site. And in terms of rounding off, that's also been just pointed out by the chair and as shown on the plan here. If there was an obvious gap site, because the whole small building group at Stapleton Grange is linear, if there was an obvious gap site, that would comply. But this is actually extending it further out beyond the existing building group that is there. So again, I'm afraid I'm struggling to see competent grounds here.
Jane Maitland.
I think that we must try and follow our policies. We're about to have an LDP review. That's the time to change this if we want to change it. We've got agreement up till now about what we have got as far as policy is concerned. And I would urge members to consider that As far as the issue of tidying it up and all the rest of it is concerned, there are methods via enforcement. It's difficult, but you can do it if there is a problem with a badly run site next to your own property with respect to amenity. So it is possible. So I would really actually urge members not to agree this. It would be, I think, a mistake.
Can you just repeat that, Jane, a bit louder, please?
What do you want?
Just what you'd urge members to do?
Oh, I've simply asked them to go with the recommendation, and that Councillor Hislop and I have put forward, I think, a motion to agree the recommendation.
It would appear we're struggling for grounds. Jim McComb, now come back to Ian. But we're not going to dance about this all day, ladies and gentlemen. If we can't get specific grounds for an alternative proposal, then the motion will stand. Jim McComb.
Thanks, Chair. My problem is, how do you justify the redevelopment of any farm steading if the steading is not classified as a brownfield site?
Well, I think what the plan officer is saying is it's just about taking back to nature anyway, and in general, all agricultural sites can be returned to agriculture as opposed to being a brownfield site. But I'm not a planner. I'm just repeating what the plan officer said. Ian.
I just wonder if we could the rest of the comments that I made earlier clarified in regards to competency. I made numerous comments and you only touched on one or two of them.
Run this past me again.
No, if David's got to answer that, it looked like he was.
David, go on then.
I was actually just saying, could you run them past me again? Sorry.
Okay. I spoke about there being a conflict because of the potential to come back in regards to the building. There'll be two portal buildings, very large, over and domineering buildings, to say the least, and a silage clamp. Also, there is an impact in the local economy. There is an amenity. There's a conflict in regards to the amenity. We've discussed it earlier with other applications in regards to the aspect. Certainly haven't got a right to a view, but there is a benefit to the local economy. There is a demand for these houses. It does help towards the local housing strategy. There's a raft of things there that can be used in regards to making this competent. I'm outlining them, but I'm not a professional planner. I'm asking for advice, and I don't think it's proper. The direction you're trying to take it, Chairman, is to get it ruled out as incompetent. I think it should be ruled competent. There is competent reasons being put forward, and that should be applied.
You've already been told there'll be no financial substance provided to officers to support the financial
I'm asking
element.
for clarity, and you're coming back and not giving that a chance, Chairman.
They've been told
Well,
there
I've
are
asked if I can get my
7,000...
questions answered, please.
Stop, Ian, or I'll ask you to leave. You've been 7,000 extant permissions, and the officer said it doesn't appear that it's absolutely essential. You've already been told that.
Chairman,
David,
we're
I'll
only
ask you to
told
repeat
there's
it again.
7,000 extant permissions.
Just for clarity, the LDP, I understand, is about 700 units identified. It's not 700 extant permissions. There's a difference. But just looking through it, well, I've covered the issue of the brownfield. I've covered the issue of the rounding off. Each application has to be looked at on its own merit, so I don't think you can really mention the previous cases as they're not directly comparable. The issue about the appearance of the site, as Councillor Maitland has addressed, under Section 179 of the Planning Act, a wasteland notice could be served on the site to tidy it up if it becomes a problem. So the betterment from that side of things, I'm again struggling. In terms of the local economy and the demand and waiting list, there are alternative sites available. If we were in a position where all sites within the local development plan had been taken up and there was a clear housing shortage, then I would agree that there would be justification to actually look at that. But again, I come back to the economic benefit report was, I'm told, not submitted. It's entirely up to yourself, Chair, if you want to just accept that as what Councillor Carruthers' view is and perhaps go to a vote on that.
Right, we'll accept that. We've got a proposal from you. Do you have a seconder for that proposal? Ian?
Sorry, Chair, could I just hear the proposal?
Ian Carruthers, repeat your proposal, please.
I think David summed it up well here in regards to saying look for professional advice in regards to this, but I believe there is a conflict when it comes to amenity.
there is an impact, on a positive impact on the local economy. I think it does help towards the local housing strategy as produced within the local Dumfries and Galloway's local housing strategy. There's numerous, I could go on and on, Chairman, but it's the level that's being rolled in or rolled out as being incompetent. We're absolutely clear, but I mean, there's three aspects there in particular.
We'll tidy it up if your proposal finds favour. We'll find a form of words that will satisfy that. So yeah, you've got that as a proposal. Is there a seconder? Peter Diggle. Jane Maitland.
I'm sorry, Chairman. I want to know exactly what we are voting against. I want a form of words from the amendment, please. I don't want a tidying up in the future.
Normally, David Sutty will help when there's a proposal, and he has suggested that we can accept there is a financial benefit to these houses being placed where they are, and it will deal with the local economy. David, can you just, a form of words, please, that members will understand?
The wording which I've scribbled down here that Councillor Carruthers is putting forward as an amendment is that the development would result in an improvement in the visual and residential amenity for the area. It would result in an improvement to the local economy as a result of the development taking place, and it would facilitate additional housing provision in the area.
And that can be a proposal that anybody can use in future when they want to put forward an amendment. You've got a proposal from you've got a proposal from Alistair Geddes, seconded by Archie, was it? Ivor Hislop. And then you have an amendment by Ian Carruthers, seconded by Peter Diggle. Jane, did you want to come back in again? Ian Dick does. Ian.
Thanks, Chair. Just given that I was speaking in support before, but given the advice of officers, much as I would really want to desire to second that proposal for the reasons already given, I do accept there are issues here which really the LDP is going to have to start looking at, and that if we want to go in a different direction, so for that reason I reluctantly won't second it, and appreciate the advice.
Thanks very much, Ian. Okay, we have a proposal and an amendment. Can you just clarify what they are, Lucy, please, and take us to the vote? So the proposal is to go with the officer's recommendation, and David will repeat the amendment for Lucy.
And the amendment is to approve the development as an exception to policy because of the in summary, approval in terms of amenity, the economy and housing provision.
Okay, the motion has been put forward by Councillor Hislop and has been seconded by Councillor Maitland.
No. Proposed by Councillor Geddes, seconded by Councillor Ivor. All right. Oh, so it's that long ago.
Sorry, Chair, I should also clarify as well that given the problems that we had last month, this should be an approval subject to conditions and subject to the appropriate conditions, which I would trust you would delegate.
More than willing to see them being delegated. Unlikely that it'll go forward, but it's more than willing to see them being delegated, and not looking to go into a great level of detail like within committee.
Okay, we have a motion put forward by Councillor Hislop and seconded by Councillor Maitland, and that's to refuse the application in the report, and an amendment put forward by Councillor Carruthers and seconded by Councillor Diggle to approve as an exception to policy on the basis of socio-economical reasons, housing, and in support of the housing strategy. And David might want to clarify the other.
Well, again, in summary, what I'd had scribbled down here is amenity, the economic benefit, and the housing provision.
We proceed to the vote. Councillor Dempster.
Motion.
Councillor Dick.
Abstain.
Councillor Dryborough.
Motion.
Councillor Blake.
Amendment.
Councillor Geddes.
Motion.
Councillor Gilroy. Councillor McGregor. Oh, no, here. Councillor McCaughtrey.
Motion.
Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor McKee.
Motion.
Councillor Ogilvie.
Motion.
Councillor Thompson.
Motion.
Councillor Witt.
Motion.
Councillor Maitland.
Motion.
Councillor Syme.
Motion.
And Councillor Hislop. Councillor Crothers.
Amendment.
Councillor Crothers.
That was amendment.
And Councillor Diggle. And Councillor Groom.
Amendment.
And I can confirm that the motion carries with 12 votes to 6 and 1 abstention.
it. 12-5 and an abstention.
So I stand corrected, 12-5 and abstention.
Can you just confirm the decision of the committee, Lucy, please?
And the decision of the committee is that to follow the recommendations as per the report.
Thank you. I have no further business. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your attendance today.